Dear friends, it is a short study of the Apostolic Exhortation Dilexi Te of the Holy Father Leo XIV to all Christians on love for the poor. This new Apostolic Exhortation Dilexi Te was published on October 9, 2025. As introduction, we can see that this apostolic exhortation is a bridge between two popes. 5 months into his pontificate, Pope Leo XIV issued his first major document, Dilexi Te, which means I have loved you, completing a project begun by his predecessor, Pope Francis. Described as a document of 4 hands, Dilexi Te both honors the legacy of Pope Francis and signals the early direction of Pope Leo's leadership. Its title, taken from Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, reflects a divine declaration of love and parallels Pope Francis' 2024 encyclical Dilexit Nos, He has loved us, which focused on the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Pope Leo XIV builds on this theme with urgency and tenderness. The love of Christ for his people is real, and it demands a concrete response, especially care for the poor. Thus, Dilexi Te calls the Church to rediscover its mission of love through unity, charity, and fidelity to tradition. Now let us look what it means as a continuity of love and mission. Pope Leo in the beginning says, I am happy to make this document my own. In these words, Pope Leo acknowledges both the origin of the document and his personal stake in its message. He has revised and expanded the unfinished draft left by Pope Francis, incorporating theology, church tradition, and references to social doctrine, while preserving Pope Francis' tone of pastoral urgency. Pope Leo sees Dilexi Te as a natural sequel to Dilexit Nos, moving from contemplation of Christ's heart to a call to imitate that heart by loving the poor. This act of continuity is more than symbolic, is strategic. In a church fractured by ideological divides, Pope Leo is modeling what it means to honor a predecessor without freezing the magisterium in place. Now let us look at the structure of this apostolic exhortation, Dilexi Te. The exhortation spans 121 numbered paragraphs and is divided into 5 thematic chapters, which can be summarized as follows. The first one, a few essential words. Love of God cannot be separated from love for the poor. The Pope challenges Christians to break free from selfishness and listen to the cry of the poor. He rebukes complacency in the face of suffering, referencing tragic events like the 2015 death of Alan Kurdi to illustrate how society becomes numb to injustice. The second, God chooses the poor. The second chapter, this chapter presents the biblical roots of the church's preferential option for the poor. Far from excluding others, this divine preference emphasizes God's closeness to the vulnerable. Pope Leo traces this theme from the Hebrew prophets to the Gospels, showing God's consistent concern for the oppressed. The third chapter is a church for the poor. And in this chapter, Pope Leo gives a historical account of the church's care for the poor. He names saints like Saint Lawrence, Saint Therese of Calcutta, and Saint Dulce of the Poor, and honors movements led by women and lay people. He also highlights the contributions of Latin American theology, especially the idea that the poor are subjects, not mere recipients of aid. The fourth chapter, a history that continues. Pope Leo XIV places the Church's social doctrine within a long tradition, citing Pope Leo XIII's Rerum Novarum, Vatican II, and the Latin American Bishops' Conference, Medellin, Puebla, Aparecida. He underscores the existence of structures of sin in the global economy and urges Catholics to confront these systems with both charity and justice. The fifth chapter, a constant challenge. The final chapter is a steering call to action. The Church must remain in solidarity with the poor, not in theory but in practice. Almsgiving is affirmed as a vital and under-practiced and Christian duty. The Pope insists love must be visible, tangible, and sacrificial. Now let us look some of the particularities, specialities of this encyclical. One is this Augustine's witness and Leo's inspiration. A major original feature of Dilexi Te is its engagement with Saint Augustine, whom Pope Leo, an Augustinian himself, describes as a vigilant pastor and theologian of rare insight. And let us see a quote from this Apostolic Exhortation, Dilexi Te. Today, fidelity to Augustine's teachings requires not only the study of his works, but also a readiness to live radically his call to conversion. Unquote. Saint Augustine is not presented merely as a doctrinal authority, but as a living model for unity and service. His vision of the Church, a people united by love of God and neighbor, is held up as the antidote to the Church's present divisions. Pope Leo XIV's use of Augustine to bridge doctrine and charity is significant. Augustine's theology unites love and truth. Similarly, Pope Leo XIV seeks to unite concern for the poor with fidelity to the Church's tradition. His message is that true holiness involves both orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Another point that we can study from this Apostolic Exhortation is theology of liberation, a balanced approach. A surprising inclusion in Dilexi Te is a quote from the 1984 Vatican Instruction on Liberation Theology by then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger. The document, often controversial, critiqued distortions in liberation theology but affirmed the Church's duty to the poor. Pope Leo XIV uses the document not to condemn but to affirm the importance of keeping charity and orthodoxy together. He acknowledges that the document was not initially well received by everyone, but sees it as part of the ongoing dialogue on how the church serves the poor while remaining rooted in the gospel. Now let us look another speciality of this apostolic exhortation, that is the unity as a first priority. In his inaugural homily, Pope Leo declared, I would like that our first great desire be for a united church, a sign of unity and communion, which becomes a leaven for a reconciled world. Unquote. Unity is not just a theme in Dilexi Te, it is its structural goal. In tone and content, the document avoids polemics and seeks common ground. Around 40% of citations are from Pope Francis, but Pope Leo XIV chooses quotes unlikely to stir controversy. He shows how Pope Francis' message about the poor fits within the broader tradition, something Pope Francis often struggled to communicate clearly. This strategic emphasis on unity, doctrinal, pastoral, and theological, marks a mature and conciliatory beginning to Pope Leo's papacy. Now let us look the surprising footnotes and historical context. The 130 footnotes of Dilexi Te offer insight into the document's intellectual DNA. Among the notable references, the following comes from Pope Francis' Evangelii Gaudium, most frequently cited. Then we see from Saint Ambrose, who declared almsgiving to be an act of justice, not charity. Then we find a 1984 European Community document on poverty. Another important citation is from Vincenzo Paglia's 2014 book on poverty. Then we find also Pope Francis' conversations with Rabbi Skorka on heaven and earth. So these citations reveal the document's wide scope, both biblical, patristic, magisterial, and socio-political. Let us look now the key themes for reflection and discussion. As students and those who are interested to study this document can further study the points like the preferential option for the poor. Why does God choose the poor? How does this challenge our view of success and status? Another point is to study unity and holiness. How can the church be both prophetic and united? Can we truly be one church when facing such diversity? Another point to study is from this document, almsgiving and justice. What role does personal charity play in a world of systemic inequality? What's the difference between almsgiving and justice? The next point to study is structures of sin. What are examples of structures of sin today? How can Catholics respond at both personal and communal levels? Finally, another point to study is Saint Augustine's relevance today. What does Saint Augustine teaches us about conversion and community in a divided church? Dear friends, in the conclusion, let us see that through this apostolic exhortation, we find a church that loves without limits. In one of its most striking lines, Dilexi Te closes with this vision. Quote, a church that sets no limits to love, that knows no enemies to fight but only men and women to love, is the church that the world needs today. Unquote. This is the heart of Dilexi Te. Love as the center of the Christian life. Love that expresses itself in unity and service. Love that remembers the poor not as projects but as persons, our sisters and brothers. In issuing this document, Pope Leo XIV has not only paid tribute to Pope Francis but also begun to chart his own path, a path shaped by patristic wisdom, social engagement, and a passion for unity. Now, let me give you a few questions for discussion. In your groups, in small groups, you can discuss. The first question is, how does Pope Leo XIV balance continuity with innovation in Dilexi Te? The second question for study and discussion is, what does the document teach about the relationship between doctrine and charity? The third question, in what ways does the church today reflect or fail to reflect the preferential option for the poor? The fourth question, how can St. Augustine's emphasis on unity and conversion guide us in current church debates? The final question for the study and discussion, how does Dilexi Te challenge you personally in your approach to the poor? Now, for those who are further interested, I would suggest that that's for the students as well as for all those who are interested, read Revelation chapter 3, verse 7 to 13, focusing on verse 9, and reflect on the contest of love amidst struggle. Then also it is good to study key social encyclicals like Rerum Novarum, Caritas in Veritate, and Fratelli Tutti. A modern Catholic saint who lived out service to the poor, like example like Teresa of Calcutta. So start a local initiative that links prayer, study, and a direct action to serve the poor. Thank you for listening to this short study of the Apostolic Exhortation, Dilexi Te, of Pope Leo XIV.